The important thing also, Professor, is fighting arts and martial arts has brought two completely different cultures, the Japanese and the Brazilian. And you've had the experience of living and experiencing Japan and Brazil. What would you say is the main difference in culturally?
Oh, I mean, I think it's almost the opposite.
Right, absolutely.
Because, you know, Brazilians has very little about traditional culture in terms of education, in terms of respect. Everything is about feelings, about tempers.
It's emotional.
It's very emotional. And you have to deal with that, combining with the lack of education. You know, a big part of the country has no education.
Right.
So from different reasons, people are there. It's very hard to relate with. It's lack of respect, hard to make yourself like, you know, smoothly anywhere because no lines. Everybody wants to pile in the door. So it's a lack of respect, basically. And Japan is the opposite. It's all about respect and
Zen.
Yeah. So I think the only similar thing we have is Jiu-Jitsu. The other than that is the opposite.
But wouldn't you say, though, like a lot of people, even from America, they say, I'm having a hard life. But a third world hard life is so much more harder. Wouldn't you say that that's true also for the Brazilian third world culture? Like, it's a different kind of poor, right? It's a different kind of poverty.
Yes, but yes, definitely is a different kind of poverty, different kind of culture.
Right.
But in other ways, Brazilians are very much, they respect their feelings. How are we going to explain? But sometimes you have a lot of fun with no money, nothing.
Correct.
So they can have carnivals, like a lot of popular parties and celebrations, has no involvement with how much you have or how much you make this month, or if you don't have bills to pay, you're going to still enjoy and party and thinking and leaving everything for the next day.
And would you say that adds a lot to the soul of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because it comes from a happy culture, not necessarily monetarily driven, but it's rich, but it's also painful and soulful.
Yeah, it's a lot of emotions. And the reason Jiu-Jitsu developed in Brazil different than in Japan,
correct,
because was emotional feeling. So at one point, people wants to challenge you to see if you, for sure, if you're truly good. So was like an open challenge all the time. And some brawlers come and just say, okay, I don't believe you. Let's prove me. So my dad coming 3 o'clock in the morning down to the street to fight somebody who just didn't believe. So those emotional things, those, you know, very, very emotional and short-tempered things, put Jiu-Jitsu in an edge which doesn't have it in Japan. It's more like sportive, and as the evolutionary process go, people start to become more like, oh, you want to train, you go to the gym and war. In Brazil now, there's a lot of fights, you know, because of a lack of respect.
Correct.
People fight on the street much more often, and based on that kind of need, they develop a more effective self-defense style.
Professor Jean-Jacques has a pyramid of like which art works best in getting more submissions. Like the gi, you get far more. The no gi and then the MMA. For your methodology and Crohn's methodology, why is it that you guys stuck to the street self-defense practicum?
Because our core, our culture is support Jiu-Jitsu in a self-defense perspective, because martial arts is different than a game.
Correct.
When you learn martial arts, your needs are to become self-confident within, in order to become more peaceful, in order for you to become better in strategize your life, controlling emotions, be more disciplined. I mean, all the elements within martial arts, they are complete when you extend the service of martial arts for real life situation.
Right.
As you stay away from the real life, you become more like rules, sport, competitions, medals, but you go away from the core of why you practice. Becomes more like an activity than a functional aspect of your code, you know, of being a human being and be able to capitalize on all the elements of your inner peace, strength, strategy, and so on.
Do you find a substantial or a difference in type of student who's more sports over someone self-defense?
For me, I always try to focus and give him first the sense of self-defense aspect. The program has to begin with the understanding of the elements he's gonna understand, like invisible power, leverage, weight distribution, and all those will create like the first understanding of, okay, by learning this, I'm capable to protect myself, to protect my family, to be able to speak my mind, So that is the core. And then as you practice, in order for you to become more comfortable and keeping this in your lifestyle,
right,
you start to practice the chess game of Jiu-Jitsu, which is changing positions, and of course you're still with friends, but you still like developing the sense of strategy and maneuvers and sharpness and timing. So the competition, I think, is enhancing that capability the guy has to bring the concepts of martial arts to a more regular practice.
Now, you mentioned on the great Joe Rogan podcast with Eddie Bravo that you overheard a jiu-jitsu instructor was questioned, like, can we learn self-defense? No, take Krav Maga.
Yes.
So there's probably several points in your heart where it just make you turn, because that's the whole point of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. Was there particular points where you said, you know what, this is enough from watching other instructors?
No, I've been follow up the evolutionary process of Jiu-Jitsu. I've been giving seminars, like at least from the last 8 years after I moved back to Brazil.
Right.
I'm focused only on travel and seminars all over the world. And I see a big need, because maybe at least 60 or 70% of the black belts which come into my seminars, they have no understanding of self-defense and some other basic related moves. So I felt like it was a big need from the whole Jiu-Jitsu community to understand those principles, to keep us in touch with the core of our culture and our purpose in teaching and practicing. So I brought that kind of idea in a much more bigger way by doing the federation, which can serve much more people and inform and educate much more people at once.
Now, do you find it more difficult for a black belt that's been in sport to unlearn and relearn?
No, I think, once you have an open mind in any activity you do,
okay,
and somebody coming to you and enlighten you with something, and you're gonna say, wow, man, I spent 20 years and I never saw this. So I feel like that's a huge motivation for you to rebirth, for you to reinvent yourself and keep going, because that's your passion. So imagine yourself driving a Porsche, but you didn't even know it's a 4th, 5th, and 6th gear. You just were 1, 2, 3, and you stop on 3.
Right, okay.
So the engine goes, but...
That's a good analogy.
I mean, and then I say, hey, man, you have the 4th and the 5th. When you really go into the freeway, you can put 4th, 5th, and 6th. Wow! So the engine, everything becomes, if you like to drive, you're going to have a different motivation at this point.
Now, you mentioned that you went back to Brazil, and a lot of it, I assume, was due to the departure of Rickson. What is it that Brazil fulfilled compared to being in the U.S.?
I was living in the U.S. For almost 20 years at that point.
And thank you for sharing, Professor.
And then I felt like being in the U.S. at that point in my life was not giving me the chills, the heart, the feelings I was seeking for. So I went to Brazil not to become rich, not to conquer anything, was just to fulfill my soul and my spirit and my body with friends, with good food. And the vibrations where I'm a tropical rat. I have to stay on the coastline, and so everything was pleasurable for me at this point. And I spent 8 years traveling around to work and going there to recharge my batteries. But as the time progressed a little bit, my new wife shows she's could like to live here a little bit, and then the federation come up to be part of my life. So I decided to come back and relocate myself here in Cali.
And then the adjustment period from Brazil to Cali, how has that been? Pretty fluid?
Oh, it was very good. The worst part was bring my dogs.
How many dogs do you have?
3 dogs.
You have 3 dogs?
Yes.
A part of the move back here, obviously, is the federation.
Yes.
How did that come into part in fruition?
I tell you, nothing can be more motivating than this new venture, because I feel like it's a huge need. The community needs to get more from Jiu-Jitsu. The sport needs more from a governing body. So I felt like by doing this, I will diminish my physical effort on the seminars, and I will put my image, my experience, and my guidance to work for the whole entire Jiu-Jitsu community and the sport itself. So I'm more than happy to be at service, because our mission statement is to be at service. You know, give a good support from the practitioner to the competitor, to the black belt, to the instructor, to the school owner, independent promoters, and other federations. So we are to support those and make a unified governing body for the Jiu-Jitsu.
You also mentioned on several interviews that, of course, this is for everyone in any belt ranking system, but the white belt would benefit the most.
Yes.
If you could further elaborate and explain why.
Yeah, because, you know, we're talking here about, I can say, revolution in the sport. Because, like I said, our mission is service, but our 3 pillars of action will be the competitive aspect, the information aspect, and the educational aspect. So we're going to have a huge information platform. We're going to communicate. We're going to have a profile of every fighter, like Facebook. We're going to have like a directory from everybody, like Google. So you're able to search for academies. You're able to communicate, get into the forums. We're going to have a master's council to speak and have an active voice for the community and any subject.
Oh, it's fully interactive and like the Jiu-Jitsu Google almost.
Yes, and we're going to have a development council members who are going to be not the great masters, but the guys who are hands-on in the Jiu-Jitsu community with 3 or 4 academies, putting people in the schools to compete. So those guys have to have a voice in order to make everything get better, you know? So we're going to have contributors from all corners of the world to bringing news from tournaments or news from Jiu-Jitsu itself, interviews. So we're going to try to create a very democratic headquarters for Jiu-Jitsu news. Everything what happened supposed to be there. Reporting all the fighters, all the results from tournaments. So this communication aspect is very strong. But in order for us to restore, because again, our mission is service, but our biggest problem is effectiveness. We have to bring back, restore effectiveness. So in that order, we have to change a little bit the rules of competition, because the competition today, I'm passionate to watch every fight, but maybe 8 out of 10 are very boring.
Because they want to hold the position and earn that point.
Yeah, the evolutionary process of the competition make some champions make the option of what I'm saying, anti-jiu-jitsu moves. So they create techniques to avoid the motion, to have more control in the action, to be able to be more sharp on the little movements who makes advantages, and then they sit back again, they stall, they hold. So because their vision is the medal. And that
not the street effectiveness.
Yes, so the efficiency to get the medal is different than effectiveness in real life.
So has your professor, changed throughout the years, or has it stayed the same as far as for teaching?
It was just the evolutionary process of competing, because people want to make the easy way for the medal, and more they engage in a kind of fair fight, more risky that is. So in order for them to diminish the risk and more assured of the medal, they become with stalling positions, who is still legal in the rules, to become like in control. So they stop everything with good grips, with excellent training, and everybody feels like, okay, I cannot move, so they wait, and then eventually they make a little move, which leads to advantage, and then they win the medal.
Right.
So this, even though it's very efficient, losing effectiveness. So I don't want to make a huge change in the rules. It's not about reinvent the wheel.
Right.
But I will take off the advantages, and I will penalize the stalling positions. So by just those two little things, the dynamic of the fight will be completely different, because the guy's not going to be like sitting down, just waiting, stalling. So he cannot stall. And because the points are kind of classic points, the advantage becomes another different, very complicated way to judge the fight. So taking the advantage and take the stalling positions, like penalizing stalling, will be a great change of the dynamic of the
Have you figured that out yet? Like, let's say, okay, he's holding onto the collar too long. That's a stalling.
Yes.
There's negative points for that.
Yeah.
Have you molded that
completely?
Yes.
Judging because
already?
all the positions who you grab without the purpose of make it happen, you just stalling.
Okay.
The referee will immediately identify it and warn, and then -1, -2, and DQ.
So it's to promulgate activity.
Of course.
Activity, progress.
It's good for the audience. It's good for the practice of the athlete, who becomes more realistic in the action, the way he moves. It's good for the sport because creates a more interesting vision of the sport itself.
Sure.
So he's able to bring TV eventually, bring major sponsors. So the whole idea is to bring back effectiveness to the game.
So now this is you coaching millions of people.
Yes.
And try to simplify the journey.
Yes.
If you're a white belt, what are like 2-3 points that you're just supposed to worry about?
Right now?
Correct. We're going to go through all the belts, but just like, let's say for the white belt.
Right now, the white belt wants to be like the champion he saw. So he wants to be like a champion, and the champion will work all these negative ways. So he starts to be misled to a jiu-jitsu he expects to be effective because he saw other Gracies in the cage. So he saw a lot of things. He said, well, I want to be effective. I want to be like, the Gracies. I want to fight. I want to be able to have self. But his style of training will direct him in a different competitive direction, which has the stallings. So it's important for me now, it's not about what the champions think about it. Okay. For me, the most important thing is re-educate at least 85% of the competitive community who is still whites and blue belts.
So let's say for white belts, do you just work on just defense, keep your elbows in, tuck your neck, or like what specific, like right now, you're a white belt, don't worry about submitting people. What should a white belt encompass in their philosophy?
No. I mean, the learnings is always the same. You have to learn how to establish a position, have a weight distribution to be in control, how to escape from positions when you be in control, how to grab, how to squeeze. The techniques you learn are basically the same. But if you play the game in order for you to win a medal, you may gonna use installing games. Okay. If you play the game in order to be the best guy out there, you have to play the game in order to pass the guard, mount, submit. So one thing is your strategy to make the medal. Sometimes a lot of champions who go to the medal, they don't intend to be the best guy out there. He intends to make you confused.
Rack the points up.
Make you confused, get advantage on you, and make the medal. And a lot of times people say, oh man, I was feeling, the guys just hold me, he don't want to fight me, and he sweep me at the end and make the medal. So that's not exactly the concept in our culture, because in our culture you want to engage to submit. So you want to escalate positions, escalate pressure to be able to go for the kill, not only to the medal. So you have to go for the pressure.
Because sometimes in competitive gi and no gi, sometimes it's the people who understand the rules more.
Yes.
Win, right? Am I being wrong here? Or?
Completely. Sometimes a very good strategist in the rules, he fights with less effort and is able to capitalize because the rules allowed him to stay in some positions who are just stalling positions. And the other guys get confused, and then the time passes by, and then the guy make a little maneuver, get a little advantage, and win the match.
From your coaching, teaching experience, what is the hardest belt move? Is it blue to purple, purple to brown?
Is to get the blue belt.
Really?
Yeah, because
why is that?
Because from white belt you have no idea, and you start to create your reflexes, your understanding. For you to become a blue belt, you definitely have to understand the whole game. You already know how to mount, you already know the chokes, you already know the arm locks, you already know the escapes, you already feel the pressure, you already know how to handle and last longer on the training, how to breathe. So you already become a jiu-jitsu animal as a blue belt. And white belt, you nothing, you just started. And then when you become a blue belt, you know the whole game. You just don't have the practice, the reflexes. So once you're a blue belt, just the maintenance will lead you to the black belt. But until you get the blue belt, you maybe still have nothing to really feel like in your core, you know, it's not exactly you yet. You're still trying to learn. When you get the blue belt, you really feel like, okay, now I have something.
What do you feel is the major difference between a brown and a black belt then?
Almost none. It's just a consistent, continuous experience. But the brown belt already know these possibilities. He already been there. He done everything. He just didn't compete in black belt yet, but that's what he's looking for. So he's just keeping more like train hard and keeping the reflex to get the next level. But it's just a continuation.
Now, this is probably a topic. It goes from Muay Thai, Karate, Jiu-Jitsu, all the schools. I've been meeting a lot of people that train in two schools. Like a classic example, I've met two people. One trains at Cobrina and one trains at Eddie Bravo's Templana. I know one person that trains at I won't mention, a Gracie Academy and then Machado Academy. How do you feel about that?
This is like...
Because this is very prevalent now. Now that the UFC is exposed, people want to cross over and train with different masters.
I mean, it's the mentality where you want to learn. And that open mind mentality make you seek for knowledge regardless. So if it's in this academy, if in that, or if in this, is the mentality of cross-training. Oh, I need to lead box from somebody, wrestling from somebody, and jiu-jitsu from somebody. So all this, those days become more and more usual. But in reality, if you somebody coming in your school and you start to preparing him, you giving love, you giving advice, you giving respect, it becomes family. In that sense, you know, he will compete under your flag, he will be a representative of your knowledge. If this guy starts to divide all this with somebody else, like another jiu-jitsu school, that will create a problem, because who you going to represent when you compete? What flags you stand by? So then becomes more like the pride to be representing somebody. And the instructor will feel the same. If you not decide who you're going to represent, why am I going to bother to give my soul to you or give my... You understand? I feel like this is not my son. It's somebody else's son, and come here just to suck my knowledge and sometimes represent somebody else. So this kind of creates a little controversy about, and in Brazil we call creonte, which is the guy who betrayed the teacher and goes somewhere else to get an easier promotion. Some students of mine, they stay around with blue belts forever, and they go somewhere just for training for a day, another place, and they say, hey man, you should be a brown belt. You know, you come. So they sometimes get appealing the sense of getting promoted. So a lot of guys, they have different ways to see this. For me, I mean, you should be loyal to one school. You should have like this kind of loyalty, you know. That feels better if I'm going to teach or if you're going to learn, this kind of sense of family. But in those days, a lot of people kind of try to keep your open mind and learn here, learn there, learning tapes, learning practice.
Right.
And I have to accept that as kind of a modern way to see the training.
So do you feel even if it's a gi to a no gi school, that's still a little disloyal, too close to?
Yes, because, you know, I feel like we have the same techniques. We train sometimes with gi, without gi. I feel like that's not exactly the conflict. I mean, only if you're unhappy with where you learn, you should change completely and go somewhere else.
How about, like, let's say it's a Muay Thai school and then your Jiu-Jitsu school. Is that okay?
No, that's completely different.
Okay.
That's a completely different lifestyle and style of fight. It's not grappling, it's not ground fight.
So as long as it's one's a striking art, one's a grappling art,
it's better. It's much better.
Because it's much better to learn one math to get to 10 first, right?
I agree.
Would you say then that to the students who like to cross over too much, ground yourself and stick to one school for now, and understand the hunger and the thirst should be calm down, but stick to one professor?
Yes, I feel like, sometimes you're too much anxious, and the knowledge is like, no matter how much knowledge you see and you try to learn, goes down to like a funnel and drips in your brain like layer by layer. So in other words, you cannot learn, if you have 5 masters, you cannot learn from the 5 masters at the same time and become a super times 5, It's not like that. You have to absorb a knowledge from one thing and then another and start to afterwards get a feeling of combining things, But you have to go deep. If you want to be a good striker, you cannot be training striking in the morning and jiu-jitsu at night. You have to really deep yourself in the striking arts and get the reflex and train one part of the day and learn the other part of the day and see. So because the learning is the training, so everything has to be under the same concept.
So now that we have evolved so much in 2014, is Gracie Jiu-Jitsu enough as the master and soul art, no accessory?
I agree. I completely agree on that. Even though it's a mixed martial arts, even though people start training differently, I feel like, for example, my son plans to compete this end of this year, and he's not training other arts. He's not training box or kickbox or wrestling.
Right.
He has, yes, good kickboxers, good boxers, and good wrestlers to spar with him, for him to try to apply the anti-game for them and bring in the fight to Jiu-Jitsu. So he's 100% Jiu-Jitsu playing against boxers, 100% Jiu-Jitsu playing against wrestlers. So once he has to get into the boxing game to defeat a boxer, he will need another lifetime to become an expert. And he may never will, because sometimes he's not as talented as Sugar Ray Leonard or some other good boxers in the MMA game who has a good heavy hands and a good style. So he has to stick on Jiu-Jitsu. He has to learn how to clinch well, to stay away or too close or too. He has to play the anti-game of what exactly is the worst for the striker. And eventually when he clinch, he has to do exactly the anti-game of the worst for the grappler, for the wrestling, and try to keep everything on the Jiu-Jitsu, universe.
How do you coach your son, Carl?
How?
Yeah.
I'm trying to be very relaxed because I'm confident he is the one who's being pressured himself. So I'm away from being like the coach who is, okay, do it one more. Okay, let's go harder. You kidding? So because he's doing already the hardest he can go. So I'm more like, don't forget to do this. That's great. Okay, you want to rest now? Because I know he's always pushing himself to the max. It's different animal. He's not exactly the guy who I want to push him as like a sergeant or a coach and try to make him go to his limits. He's already, I have to put him down to don't overtraining or do too much, So I'm kind of more like keeping him in control.
So it's kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar with the coach Phil Jackson with the Lakers. He has 11 rings in championships, and his system is everything's done in practice, and you are your own person.
Yes.
If you were to coach someone else, would you be at that method, or would you have to really dissect the personality and the person first? Let's say if I approached you, I said, Professor, I want to learn how to fight, represent Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Rickson Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, I mean, my father taught me something very valuable in a very early age, which was, if you want to be a good teacher, you teach what you know and hope the guy learn. If you want to be an excellent teacher, you have to understand your student and know what he needs to learn. And then you teach him what he needs for him to be the best he can be. So that way, I'm never going to teach the same for everybody. I will kind of customize my teachings and my opinions and my moral pushes. It depends how you take it and how much you go. Right. Some people I have to push. Some people I have to hold. Some people I have to say, hey man, be sharp. Okay, wake up. Some others I say, hey man, relax, breathe. Don't go too.
Right.
So it's all about, be able to serve at the best level the guy who want to absorb that.
Now, before we close, I'm going to make you choose either or for the answer. Okay, just choose either or. Joe Rogan or Eddie Bravo?
Oh, Joe Rogan.
Which one out of the two Diaz brothers would you choose? Nick or Nate? Nick is the older one.
Depends for what.
In a fight.
In a fight? I say Nick.
Manny Pacquiao or Mayweather?
Mayweather.
Mayweather. Why Mayweather?
He's faster.
More precise.
He's more precise, more technical. Pacquiao is more like a warrior and very good too, but I think Mayweather can have a better strategy on the...
Brazil or Los Angeles?
It also depends. We have a joke in Brazil. We say, Brazil is a shitty place, but it's very nice. America is very nice, but it's a shitty place. So it's like, it depends of what you're meaning for. If you come here to organize life, production, you know, different, like a first world country is great. But you're gonna have, I mean, routines, be able to like, I mean, everything is restrict, you feel like you're in the box. In Brazil, everything is disorganized, everything is, I mean, there's a lot of lack of a lot of things we have here, but you feel free. You do whatever you want, you express yourself differently, different emotions. So emotionally, rationally, is all about what's the time for you now.
And we're gonna close, but like when I go back to the Philippines, I'm half Filipino. I feel like, okay, it's the OK Corral.
Yeah.
It's fun time.
Yeah.
Do you get that feeling, that surge when you go back to Brazil too? Do you change?
Oh, yes. Brazil for me in those days is not about production, it's not about organized, it's all about respect the environment and have fun, you know, and be able to eat the best food I can eat, be with my friends, enjoy life.
This has been a pleasure.
My pleasure, my friend.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Professor.
very much.
Thank you.